Hi, good evening. Welcome to Neighborhood News. Another Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, and welcome back. Carlos, as you can see, is not here tonight. He had a neighborhood meeting that he had to attend to, and a lot of these have been thrown off due to the weather situation. Everybody's been rearranging them, so he is not here. So he's stuck with me tonight, but I have two folks here, so I'm not talking to myself the whole night. The first one I have, Nicole Sylvia, who is my daughter. She figured she'd come help me out since Carlos wasn't here. And we also have a guest, Dennis Brodeur, and he is pretty active here in Fall River. He is an arborist, and he is part of the Fall River Street Tree Planting Program that I've been involved with for probably 5 or 6 years now. He's been pretty active in that area and comes in and shows us to do things right because he is the arborist. And Dennis is also on the Fall River Tree Commission, which we're trying to get off the ground, and an advisor to the committee and the commission, and also a member. So welcome, Dennis.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Yep. So, why don't we talk about actually the establishment and what we're trying to do on the Tree Commission. I know that the last meeting we had, and the last year has been a little slow, definitely, in the movement of pushing this. But I seem to think now we're on track, at least with where we want to go, which is a good thing. And we did have a lot of turnover. We had Liz Dennehy, who is not in the position now, and now we have, I think, Byron Holmes, who's in that department. But we have John Brandt, that is the head of this. So I think it seems like we're moving in the right direction, but I want to get your take on that.
Well, clearly we're advocating trees, and we're advocating what's beneficial to the city of Fall River in terms of the ecology and the environment. Yeah. So as members of the Tree Commission, we're trying to move the city in directions of recognizing certainly science, certainly what other communities are promoting in terms of providing ways to plant trees and to encourage businesses and individuals to plant trees and to promote those values.
And it's funny because I had my neighborhood meeting the other night, and we were talking about the tree farm real quick. And one or two folks there said, well, why do we need this? Why do we need to have trees in an area? It's not going to help business. And I know, you know more than anybody because you've, read some of these studies, and I tried to put that through to people, but I think sometimes here in Fall River, it's tough to get that momentum to let people know, that there is value to this. And I can give an example. I don't know if you were there at one time. We were pruning some trees on either South Main or North Main, and there was a business person that came out, and the leaves were falling off because it was spring. I guess they were flower trees, and they were like, these all need to be taken down. Are you taking these down? And I don't think he understood the value of how that could help his business or improve his business. And you've worked in other towns where you see it does help.
Well, there's plenty of data to indicate that, but with regard to, first of all, our nursery, we really have an opportunity here in the city to be cutting edge and to lead the area geographically with this idea. So if we can grow our own trees here at low cost and plant them and make them available for homeowners and also for our tree planting committee, then people will begin to recognize that Fall River really and truly is a tree city. So we have opportunity also educationally to promote these ideas. So there are concepts traditionally here in Fall River with regard to trees, and I view it very often that people are afraid of trees. So we're certainly on the South Coast, and when we get those high winds and when we get the hurricanes, it's usually the South Coast that has the tree damage. Yeah. North of this, the winds are less severe, So people, as they grow, are not afraid so much of the trees. But we in Fall River, we get clobbered with those 90, 100 mile an hour gusts. So as a result, people have reacted by the desire to either remove the trees or reduce them. Certainly people also are discouraged very often by the mess, but you can look at it in a different way. When leaves fall, and I'm just going to encourage you to try to think about this, the leaves are literally falling in the soil, and it creates an opportunity for organisms, both bacterial or fungal, to have an opportunity to grow. That makes a healthy soil. A healthy soil, a healthy, clean air environment, clean water, that makes for a happy place. There's a lot of data to indicate, and there have been studies, and I can't quote any, but there have been studies that would certainly prove that where trees are heavily planted, people are happy. So about 30 years ago, the city of Providence began a program of dramatically planting trees. And now you go anywhere in Providence and you'll see large areas, even right in the streets where they've cordoned off, and they have now very well established and happy growing trees. And people congregate around this area, and sure, the leaves fall, and you could say that it's messy maybe if that's the way you look at it. Yeah. But again, it's building soil, insects go, birds go, people hang around these trees. It's very, very pleasant. And I grew up very young in the city, and I do remember lots of trees being in the city. Yeah. And I try to talk to people all the time, please don't take your tree down. Yeah. You can prune it, you can try to preserve it, but let's save the trees.
Save it, yeah, and you're right. I think that's been an issue here in Fall River, is that when you would ask somebody, a lot of the biggest problem I think for them is that they have to rake up the leaves, which to me now you have the leaf blowers. It's not even a big issue, with that. So, but yeah, I have heard about that in Providence, how they had that big planting, and it was parts of South Providence,
correct?
Right? That has improved, and it is amazing if you go even to an area that's not the best area in a city. Mm-hmm. If there are trees planted there, it makes it look a lot better.
Right. As a tree commission member, I'm hoping that we can encourage ordinances be created, or that people in power would try to get developers in the city to plant more trees as part of their responsibility. So in many communities that occurs. So there's a business that's built, or there's a residential neighborhood that's created, and there are many communities that require infrastructure improvement and repair. Roads, sidewalks, tree planting, and that's something we can have in Fall River, and we don't have to plant 60-foot trees. Yeah. We can plant trees that max out at 20, 30 feet, so we don't have to be concerned about them breaking apart in high winds.
Yeah, yeah, and you know what's funny is I've seen pictures of Fall River, back in the 1900s, where you see some of these, and there were a lot of big trees. Pretty much like 2nd Street, there were a lot of trees around the Lizzie Borden house there, and now it's been kind of decimated. So I think, like what you were saying, it's kind of changing people's mindset to, look at this as something that I think it's an economic engine, and I believe, you probably believe the same thing, that, or it's part of this one thing to push everything forward. And I think now with the Tree Commission, maybe we can kind of get these ideas. We have a new mayor, and we can get some of these ideas, sent, and maybe, we can get some action on it.
I remember 37 years ago when I first began to climb trees, and I'd be somewhere in the highlands, so at a high vista, and I'd be high in the tree doing my work, and I'd be able to look out through the neighborhoods and see a very green canopy. And Madison Street, for example, prior to Hurricane Gloria, that street was very, very full of large mature trees. Wow. And more recently in my career, I'd be high up in a canopy and see nothing more but buildings and roofs. Yeah. And that means less shade, less water uptake. So certainly from that perspective, we're losing value, but the beauty has gone. And thank God I had those years where I was able to be up in those trees and see that beauty. And I'm very disappointed to see it declining, but I'm also very encouraged by the Fall River Street Tree Planting Program and the Tree Commission and the advocates like you, John, and others. And I see a resurgence and a renewal, and I'm very excited about that. No, very positive.
Yeah. No, and I think it's, you know, we have a problem in Fall River where we have a lot of flooding lately, and I know that's blamed on the CSO project. I'm not really convinced that is the case, and this is just my own personal opinion. I think we've been getting storms that we never got here before, like 3 or 4 inches in an hour. That's unheard of, and I think that has all come together. But there's one area, specifically Stevens Street, which is off Brayton Avenue near the new Sam's Club across there. They put all new homes in there. I think there's probably 3 trees in that whole development. Behind there, they have condos. And the city of Fall River had to pay over $1 million to put new drainage in there. And that goes back to what you were saying. If there was some kind of site plan that said you need to put 10 trees here, or you know, put it in the complex somewhere, we probably might have still had the problem, but not as severe as what it was, and having to pay $1 million to get that fixed. You know.
Well, I agree completely, and I'm very grateful for any business activity that exists in the city, and I certainly want to promote it. But businesses have an obligation, and the business that I represent, we feel that same way, and we give back. And I know many local businesses in Fall River give back. But certainly, I think there should be instituted a way in which, especially with regard to trees, that developers and businesses should kick in and replant.
Work together, yeah.
And do it the right way. So the right tree in the right location. Place. Maybe there's a little discussion with people that have expertise and understanding about design. Choice selection of trees, native trees are really good.
Yeah. No, I think that if we can get that going, I think that's going to be great. You know, I really think it's going to be great. Well, do you have any stories you could tell us? You were just telling us a story about the canopy there. Any, so basically you also trim trees and stuff like that. And are there any tales besides the one that you could see the canopy?
Well, certainly at this point in my career, past the climbing stage, I could do it for sport, and I still actually could probably perform the service. But there are times where I specifically refused to remove trees. And I don't want to point out the exact location, but sometimes people were really looking to remove a tree that we would call be a specimen. And the Highlands in particular has some specimen trees that are very incredible. So one of my experiences in the Highlands, and I can't, it's on Highland Avenue, and it's right near the little store there, around Nicole Street. Well, there is, in a private residence, a beautiful tupelo, and I had the opportunity, of course you may not know what a tupelo is, but it's a very rare and native tree, and it's very mature. And I had the opportunity to work in that tree 2 times, but that's probably like 25 years ago. And that's that's an example of an experience where I have an opportunity to be in a significantly historic tree and have the opportunity to prune it. There are also trees off of North Main behind the Dunkin' Donuts. It used to be Bess Eaton. Well, up on that hill there are inkberry trees. And you'll find them only really along the south coast, especially in Fall River. And we have several of those, and you won't find them anywhere else. So basically, my memories always go back to the history and that sort of thing. The other kind of events I'll probably not say because I'd get myself into trouble. You know? But sometimes when you're younger, you do silly things.
Well, I didn't know if we were going to have some kind of National Lampoon Christmas thing where you're in a tree and a squirrel jumped on you or something like that.
Well, actually, raccoons, I have been in a tree, and this one unfortunately had to be removed. And certainly, all of the canopy is gone. I'm on one main stalk. And below me is a cavity. And on my way up, I detected nothing living in there, but it was hidden. and a raccoon was there.
Oh, sheesh.
And I was at the top of the tree. The raccoon didn't know what to do. It looked at me. I had my chainsaw running. It feared me.
Yeah.
The guys moved away from the tree, and it went down that way. I've had some bats fly out of their holes. I've been stung by bees in trees. That's not a lot of fun.
Not pleasant, right?
But they are pollinators, and bees are our friends, so I don't want to kill them. And any time we would go by, or I would go by a honeycomb, I'd always try to get a professional to come and rescue that hive, especially now knowing that bees are in decline and we do need them for fruit and food production. So we were careful about that sort of thing. But usually when we were working, it was very difficult work, but very rewarding. And anybody who's looking for a career in arboriculture, there is definitely opportunity. There is a future. You can also attend UMass Stockbridge for 2 years, and that'll move you in the direction of being a certified arborist. But there's unbelievable, but it's true. There is a very large demand for arborists. Women are a growing population in our industry. There are women who climb.
I want to climb up. Well, I think if I think about it, I mean, I'm not a big tree person. That's my father's MO. But I think a big part of it is the education aspect. I don't think people understand all the things that trees necessarily do. You know what I mean? I don't think that people think about the oxygen, the shade, all of that. Because if they did, I think that they would be more positive about it. And I think children too. When I work at the schools, sometimes I'll look and the kids will have, all these leaves in their pockets, and they hide them. And they just want to have them in their pockets. Or the infamous kids walking through the big pile of leaves, want to hear that crunching noise. I think kids understand. Kids understand to an extent, but I think the lack of education is there to explain the soil and trees and leaves. They learn it to an extent, but it's not taught. Just like recycling is an example, right? We tell the kids, if you have a paper, put it in the blue bin. If you have a bottle, put it in the blue bin. And then they go home and they do the same thing. Oh, Mom, I put this in the blue bin. Oh, or they ask you, can I put this in the blue bin? Is this recyclable? So I think that aspect of recycling in trees could be used. The same type of education, right?
Yeah.
Well, recycling, remember we were talking about that?
I agree.
One of the things, I'll just throw out a few ideas about what trees do, but certainly they contain or hold or sequester carbon. And so a large diameter tree will hold a lot of that in. And obviously there is a concern about the abundance of carbon in the atmosphere, so an important aspect for control of that is trees. Another thing that trees do is they accumulate elements from the soil. So we call it a dynamic accumulator. And when the leaves fall off the trees, all of those elements are contained in the leaves. So nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, iron, sulfur, all kinds of elements, and then they're deposited on the soil, and as they break down, they're literally remineralizing the earth. And that supports trees like a maple, a red maple, very dominant in this area. That tree contains, or supports, I should say, thousands of species of fungi and bacteria and microorganisms. So insects and birds have that in their bodies, and it's localized in that area, and so you have a diverse population of good things, goodies, that make human life better. So it's invisible, of course, and that's not really something that's discussed, but the removal of these trees removes the source of the native biology, and they're not able to live there anymore. And thus the decline of the environment of the city is enhanced. So there are cities that have great air quality, great water quality, great soil quality, simply because they have their large trees.
Yeah, and I think in Fall River it's been, I agree with you on that things have moved forward, with the tree planting committee and now with the tree ordinance, which I think that's something that we're going to try to have to work on too. and look over that again. But it looks like things have improved. I mean, we're not like Mansfield, like you said, that you have told us about. It's not like Mansfield at all. But I think sometimes maybe with the city, with the financial problems that we have nonstop, people are always looking at other things, and sometimes something like trees are put to the side until more money comes through. But it all goes back to what we were saying before. It's all part of the big picture to move the city forward, you know.
And it's amazing that this is occurring organically from people. So it's people that joined and formed the Fall River Street Tree Planting Program, and it's people that are moving it forward. And it's local people, most of them from Fall River.
Yeah, with the exception of one or two, right? But that's really noteworthy. Dennis does not live in Fall River. I know he's from here originally, but he does volunteer a lot of time here. And I think that's really good that we can have folks from outside the city that see the importance of this and are willing to help us out. So, so thanks, Dennis, for that.
Great. Well, I'm very connected to Fall River. I was raised here. My family is from here. I have a passion for the city.
Yeah. No, and you know, whenever you're in these surrounding towns, this is still the hub.
Oh,
so you know, so I get it. But still, sometimes we can't even get people. I'm probably the same in your town. You can't get people to volunteer. Sometimes people from outside do, and they don't see the importance of this. So. So cool.
Well, Dennis, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So you talked about the different fungi and bacteria. Who's to say that one of those bacteria or fungi couldn't be the next cure or the next penicillin?
See, now that's an excellent point. And here's a good thing. Remember this in terms of organic or the ecological approach. The diversity of organisms means that they're competing with each other. And the healthy organisms, if they're given an opportunity to really spread, they're going to dominate and outcompete the bad guys. So if that's happening in the trees, if it's happening in the soil, and if that spreads around, then it makes for a healthier environment. And you're absolutely right. There are researchers doing that type of work. And incidentally, since I've been in this field, some revolutionary ideas, absolutely mind-blowing ideas and research has occurred. For example, when I first started in the tree business, we used to put cement in trees, thinking that the strength of the tree was enhanced by putting cement in the holes. That's a concept that was proven conclusively to be false. We used to paint cuts with black paint and thinking that that would keep microorganisms out. But microorganisms are not kept out by paint. They can get through anything. But the tree each year creates a new exoskeleton, the outer layer, and that layer is impermeable. And that's called the barrier zone. So I'm talking a little bit about a science, but what I want you to understand is that modern arboriculture is all about science. So anybody, if you're going to consult with someone about trees, you want to make sure that they're informed about the science so that a proper decision is made. We don't have to cut trees down if there's nothing wrong with them. We want to remove them because they're a risk. The risk might be genetically it's just malformed, or there's decay for whatever reasons, and so you want somebody that can identify that. One of the cultural aspects that occur in Fall River, for example, is that everybody removes the lowest limbs on the tree.
You know, you must have ESP, because I was going to ask you. I see that now on my neighbor. They just bought the house. It was a Japanese maple, beautiful tree. And it's, like you're right, everything, is there any value to that, or?
No, as a matter of fact, here in Fall River, the last thing we want to do is remove all the low limbs. We want to promote trees to stay shorter. So if you remove all the low limbs, the tree then is going to react by desiring to grow taller. Speaking of Japanese maple, there is someone who lives in the city who is trying. He contracted me to remove 2 front Japanese maples. And if you're watching, please don't take these trees down. And he's doing that simply because one of the neighbors is complaining about the leaf litter. So I've done everything I can to discourage him from removing those trees. But again, ornamental trees, they max out at 35 feet. Why would you cut that tree down?
Yeah, it's just, and there are a couple houses, you know, my neighbor, but I mean, hey, it's their tree. You can't do anything, you know, but I've seen them. There's 2 individual trees that I see that they they become beautiful. And then when they're really kind of blooming, they cut the thing down, and it's just, you know, the tree limbs, and then they'll grow back in like 4 or 5 years. But I'm like, there's really no value in, you know, doing that.
Well, that concept might be called pollarding, if it's the same type of thing, and that's a concept that does come from Europe, but if applied properly, that's a strategy that works very well.
Oh, okay.
But not something that I would recommend unless there's good advice or a strategy that's being followed.
Well, we have that pine tree there. That's huge.
Yeah.
What is that, like 100 feet? I don't even know. It goes over the third story.
Yeah, we have a pine tree. But no, I've noticed that folks do that. And you know, when you cut that, it just looks ugly. I would have just, you know, just leave it the way it is. You know, if there's nothing wrong with it, why touch it? But,
if people are concerned about the size of a tree, then you can do pruning in the outer part of the canopy. So if a tree is 50 feet and you don't want it to be that tall, then you can reduce by outer thinning and reduce it 5 to 10 feet. That's going to allow the winds to pass through better, and it's going to be healthier for the tree. But if you're doing removal of lower limbs, then you're just going to promote a hormone to make the tree grow vertically. Okay. Incidentally, one of the largest redwood tree is east of the Mississippi, is in Bristol.
Wow. Wow. I didn't think we had a redwood tree east of the...
I climbed that tree about 30 years ago, and it was about 100 feet tall at that time.
Isn't that the one they showed on the news with the trunk that was huge?
Yes.
I've seen that. See, and I'm not even a tree person.
Yeah, I never saw that on TV, so cool. So, you know, getting back to what you were saying then, so if you're trimming around the tree itself, it's not going to make it grow higher then, right?
Well, if you do a lateral type of pruning and it's dramatic, you can cause the tree to grow vertically to some extent. It depends on the species.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's and I know you always talk about the right tree for the right place, and I know I've learned that myself with one of the trees that I planted. I just saw the tag, and it was in front of us like a house, you know, in the city. It wasn't like a suburban thing, and I have a huge tree now, so it's the right tree for the right place, definitely. So I think, you know, Fall River could look at that it's not going to be one of the trees in the Highlands in someone's backyard that's, you know, 200 feet tall, you know.
Correct.
So I think that's a good thing to look at. But I was asking that question because of mine. I know I've talked to you about that before. I just don't. I want it to stay where it is now. I don't want it to grow too much taller, you know. So.
Oh, a lot of people feel that way, and you're looking from the viewpoint of the aesthetic, and that's fine. Yeah. But the idea in terms of arboriculture or utilizing someone with that background, we're gonna add the science to that. So there's the aesthetic pruning, there's the proper pruning principles that scientists encourage us to use, and the science. And that's very much related to species, understanding of that. So, you know, someone really needs to, if they're in this business, they need to know the names of their trees.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, I guess that's telling us that we're done. That was quick, because I was going to mention one other thing, but we'll do it next week then. Okay, Dennis, thank you for appearing today. Nicole.
Nice to be with you, Nicole.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks, have a good night.
Good night.